After a long, thorough, and I mean exhaustive rubber glove offensive coordinator search, the Seahawks have finally found their man, hiring Klint Kubiak as the new OC. Anybody that's been following this channel knows this was my number one target from day one. It was not a landscape that was littered with grade A talents, and yet I think you might have landed yourself one here, so please allow me to make my case. Klint Kubiak comes off of the Gary Kubiak coaching tree. His father, who won a couple of Super Bowls in the mid-90s with Mike Shanahan as an assistant coach before moving on to the Texans as the winningest coach in their short history. But then he went back to the Broncos in 2018 and helped to reborn them back again into that Super Bowl world, getting them another championship with the elder statesman that was Peyton Manning and Brock Osweiler. And you know who was on that staff was Klint Kubiak. So yes, we are actually inheriting a Super Bowl winner for this job, albeit he was in a minor assistant role just starting his career out at that time. For the Broncos job, Klint Kubiak graduated to quarterbacks coach with the Minnesota Vikings through his first 2 years there before he was promoted to offensive coordinator in his final season. And he inherited Kirk Cousins as his quarterback. Now, I don't want to make any great sell job here that he suddenly turned Kirk Cousins into the quarterback that he was due to become. Kirk was already very good before Clint arrived. But what he did do in that 3 years under his supervision was produce the three most efficient seasons for Kirk Cousins during his whole career. The three highest rated seasons for Kirk Cousins during his whole career, which is a theme that I think you're going to see as I go down the line of some of the quarterbacks that he has influenced during his time. As I said, Klint Kubiak got promoted in that final year there in Minnesota to offensive coordinator for the good work that he was doing as quarterbacks coach. But this was also at a time when Mike Zimmer was at the end of the line there in Minnesota. And when you look at it at first, you look and go and say, well, he's got only 1 year there. He obviously must have failed and been bad at what he did. He must have had a Ryan Grubb-like performance, but indeed that's not the case. In looking at that 1 year performance overall, Kubiak's Vikings offense was 11th and 17th in passing and rushing respectively that season. This while also having Kirk playing at that high level as I just mentioned. So what happened? This. Mike Zimmer, as a supposed defensive guru, had the Vikings defense 28th in passing defense and 26th in rushing yards allowed. It's no big wonder why Mike Zimmer was relieved of his head coaching duties after one season. Nor are his failures a reflection of poor performance of Klint Kubiak as a first-time offensive coordinator. Klint Kubiak then moves on to be a passing game coordinator and quarterbacks coach for the Denver Broncos in 2022, or what was Russell Wilson's first year there in Denver, and it was a complete horror show. Even when a guy like Sean Payton, that mastermind of offenses, had to check out of that exact same type of situation. He had to change the parameters. He wasn't going to make that exact thing work. Klint was able to bounce back quickly, becoming the San Francisco 49ers passing game coordinator in 2023. Klint got the best season out of Brock Purdy's career from a passing standpoint. Best single season completion percentage, most yards, most touchdowns, highest individual PFF score. Look, Shanahan was the unofficial pure offensive coordinator in addition to being the head coach, but the numbers still hold true. Based off that fine year of work in San Francisco, Klint was quickly promoted to an offensive coordinator role with the New Orleans Saints. And much like his prior stop with Minnesota, he was going to a team that was led by a defensive-minded head coach who wasn't exactly holding up their end of the bargain. He was not also inheriting an offense loaded for bear. They had some interesting parts on the offensive line, but all you had was really Chris Olave and Shaheed as your skill position players, an aging Alvin Kamara at this point in time in his career, and a Taysom Hill that didn't always work in every offense. So it was not a place that was necessarily set up for him to really succeed this past year. Yet through the first early part of this season, he really had that offense humming. He had Derek Carr matching the highest spots he's ever been in his career from an efficiency standpoint, with the highest PFF grade he had had in his entire career. And then it all kind of fell apart halfway into the year, but some of that is very explainable by the nature of how many injuries they had across the board, including on their offensive line, including with Chris Olave going out halfway into the year with the concussion issue. Derek Carr only able to make it through 10 games, and a couple of those games he was already ailing until he went down finally with the injury. So as you see that performance dip off, and you got a guy like Spencer Rattler, a rookie fifth rounder out there starting many games for you this season, it's understandable why the Saints didn't necessarily produce it real high water marks that would make you a lot more interested maybe in thinking this hire would be grade A. But grade A it is when you really look at the early part of last year's schedule with the Saints and what he did, especially matching it back to what he did in his 1 year there as an offensive coordinator with the Minnesota Vikings. And when looking at especially the offensive line on this team, everybody was improved under Klint Kubiak's watch. Is that him training them up? Is them teaching? Is that the play calling that's helping him? Is it all of that included? I don't know. But Cesar Ruiz, career best year. Eric McCoy, already a very good center in this league before he went down to injury early on in the season, was having a career best season. Trevor Penning, a first-round pick, taken very high in the draft with a lot of expectation, on the edge of looking like maybe kind of a quasi-bust coming into this year. He really got a pretty good year out of him, especially as a run blocker. Lucas Patrick, best year of his career. Connor McGovern was looking like he was on his way out the league, and he got a very improved season out of him from where he had been recently. Talise Fuanga, the kid out of Oregon State that they drafted very high in the first round this last year, came out and performed very well for them in his first year. He at least met the expectations / a little bit above that. So he had that offensive line as a whole improved. Most Seahawks fans wanted an offensive coordinator that had prior experience, that had success in that prior experience, that could inherit a level of talent and elevate that level of talent. If it's grade A, you can take them up to here. If it's kind of subpar, hey, you can at least get them up to here. But you're not necessarily relying on the talent for you to find success, and you certainly are not going to get less out of the talent that you have been given. Like, let's say a untested offensive coordinator. You also want an OC who is committed to the run game and understands that that's got to be a part of what he brings in certain games, especially playing in this stadium, in this inclement weather, with the wind blowing and the rain coming down and it being cold. Sometimes it's hard to always pass in that sort of conditions. You want to be able to lean back on the run game. And you want a running game that's going to be diversified, that's going to hit you from a variety of different angles, so the defense can't predict where you're going to go or what you're going to do. That's certainly a centerpiece of this offensive attack. It's not going to be just trying to hammer power runs in the A and the B gap all day long, like we sometimes have seen prior under other regimes. So another improvement there. As a bonus, Kubiak has also served as an OC under two different defensive-minded head coaches, and he'll understand everything that comes with that dynamic, the restrictions, the limitations, how those defensive head coaches think, how they want you to sometimes manage the game as an OC, and he's not going to feel restricted necessarily within that dynamic, but understand it and be able to operate within it. As far as what his scheme will look like, we'll get to some of those greater details in future videos, but in general terms, he runs a West Coast offense that's going to be balanced. As said before, it comes from the Shanahan tree. So when you look at him and Kyle Shanahan, you're saying, what are the differences between these guys? I'd much more say there's much more similarities between them than there are differences. I think with Kubiak, you get a little bit of more maybe inventiveness here, especially as far as the smoke and mirrors, the pre-snap motion, the eye candy where he's trying to get you to look this way and go over here and that way, where Shanahan's much more kind of at times old school and just coming downhill at you. I also think the Saints offense, especially as they operated through the first half of the schedule last year when they were at their most healthy, are going to have much more shot plays built into it than what you would see from a Shanahan offense, which at times is very comfortable just matriculating the ball up the field slow but surely and controlling the clock. Kubiak's much more willing to take that shot over the top. The Seahawks enter this offseason with lackluster candidates all across the board. Untested, unproven. And had the Seahawks playing with notions of co-offensive coordinators? No. Meanwhile, you had Klint Kubiak, chambered, an ideal option, ready to go. Last year, the Seahawks took a painful amount of time before finally landing on Mike Macdonald, but it was the slam dunk hire in retrospect. Once again this year, they've had us on pins and needles, worried this process was about to go wrong by how long it's taken. Yet I'm willing to bet Mike Macdonald and John Schneider, to quote the immortal Kevin Calabro, have just put together a Sean Kemp sledgehammer jam of a hire. We shall see. You let me know below. My name is Brandon Kane. This is the Hawks Nest. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe. But beyond all that, don't you ever forget, go Hawks.